Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who are dealing with a Gemini individual who they suspect is a narcissist or other related problematic personality types. I am not a mental health professional, not playing one on YouTube, just trying to find a label to kind of illustrate what some of these types of behaviors might look like and how you might deal with such a person if you choose to deal with such a person. The other thing is that some of these behaviors are on a spectrum. I think a lot of people assume that narcissism is simply somebody who brags a lot, who keeps talking about themselves and is self-absorbed. That might be on the spectrum and on the mild side, but it can be quite destructive. That's usually just aggravating, annoying. But when you're dealing with more serious types of narcissism, it can get pretty hairy and it can adversely affect those around the individual. So we never want to downplay narcissism because of the fact that sometimes it's very severe. And in the case of the more severe varieties, the goal of this type of person is to have power over others. And this you could say that narcissists come from backgrounds of abuse and or trauma or both. And therefore, in those instances, a person feels, or usually we're going to be talking about children, that they feel very out of control or powerless. And that in itself is very traumatic. So you can imagine if you're a small child and you're getting beaten, that can feel very powerless because there's nobody there. This could be a parent who has complete control over the child. They're experiencing something very painful, traumatic, and they have no ability to stop it. Or on the mental level, mental abuse. They have no power to stop it. They can't just say, I'm out of here. So when they grow up, power becomes a way that they feel safe. And because you can't control other human beings to any great extent, that they will do whatever it takes to try to gain control, including for Gemini on the mental level. And I'll get into some of these traits that exist that they employ to gain control, but ultimately this is to feel safe. That's how I take it, even though it's highly destructive to other people. I also think that, the ego boost that we think of with narcissism, so I'm talking about, the bragging and the demeaning of others, these kinds of things are meant to kind of bolster up low self-esteem. And, again, that can be on the spectrum of just kind of little digs that are demeaning or downright horrific name calling and things like that. So trying to gain control and also trying to bolster up their self-esteem. So Gemini is a mutable air sign, and therefore Geminis are coming from a mental, intellectual, abstract place. I just did Taurus, which is an earth sign, so that's very tangible. And a Taurus narc and a Gemini narc are going to differ in certain ways simply because of their astrological signs. somebody wrote to me and said, talking about another sign, commenting and said, you can't use astrology with narcissism. And I said, well, why do you even bother with astrology at all then? We use astrology for everything to categorize different types of people. So it just is absurd that people think that you can't do that with narcissism. And you can. And one thing that with Geminis, again, this is not all Gemini people. People really, I don't know, maybe they freak out. They're listening for themselves and they see certain qualities that they have and they want to just push it away. This is for people who are narcissistic, and it's not saying all Geminis are narcissistic. So it's the shadow aspects of Gemini that are going to show up here. The first one I put down is con artist. And actually somebody requested that I do Gemini next. And I'm sure, I don't remember exactly if they said anything else with that. But that's the first thing I think of when I think of Gemini. A mutable air sign. So air signs deal in communication or deal with communication. And con artists, if you think of a used car salesman who is selling a lemon to a prospective buyer, what are they doing? They're pathological liars. They're twisting the truth. Oh yeah, this has 40,000 miles on it and it has 200,000. Twisting the truth, completely lying with a straight face. Wouldn't know the truth if it bit him in the butt type of a person. And why do they do this? Why be a con artist? Well, again, if you come from a traumatic background, some of these people have learned a bad behavior, a bad habit of lying. A lot of times when people come from messed up childhoods, they have a problem with lying because when they told the truth, they got abused. And also they saw their parents or other caregivers, adults, lying and not telling the truth. So in some cases, they may be so messed up, they don't know, they believe their own lies and they can't really tell the truth from a lie. But it's also to protect themselves and to kind of be able to always feel like they're infallible. And again, this comes from super duper low self-esteem. Even people who are not, pathological, they will tend to deny things they will tend to lie as well. I remember when I was working, with others, and this was a long time ago, but I would see people who probably were just normal people who were coworkers. I remember seeing how they would just lie that they had made a mistake. And I think this is very common just with a lot of people, where they can't accept, just say, oh yeah, I effed up. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, I'm sorry that I did that. They have to make up an excuse because they feel like it's almost like going back to childhood. Did you break that glass? The parent says, knowing that if they say yes, that they're going to get beaten or they're going to get severely, given some kind of a, insult, tirade, screamed at. So they just say no because they're trying to protect themselves. So even a person who doesn't have they're not like narcissistic can do this. But this kind of person, I wrote down or typed out, I put mind games because this is kind of a similar vein. A Gemini person, let's say that this Gemini person is in a relationship, and this is where it can really get weird because Gemini as a sign is not really what we would call one of the higher, the more sensual signs like Aries or Taurus. Now, this person might have Mars in Aries. They might have Mars in Taurus. Mars can be the sex drive. The moon can be in Libra, a sign that is in love with love. So any of these things, this person may be kind of if we're talking about a male, they could be like a womanizer type of a person, and they can a player, and they can go and play women, and it's a game to them. And the woman doesn't understand this at first, especially if she's not very discerning or if she's very insecure. She may just be so excited to hear what this bullshit artist, sorry for the vulgarity, but I had to say that, is telling her that she buys it, you know. And this person is playing this elaborate mind game on her because they have this need to be seen as desirable. And again, you know, this can get very twisted psychologically. And these are the type, I think a Gemini narc is somebody that you really, you know, scratch your head and say, why did they do this? Why did they do that? Because it could be very elaborate inside their mind, and you would never know what is possessing them to do it. But I kind of, like at the beginning, was saying some of those reasons, and I think the mind games are really a way for them to kind of like, in some cases, even a form of cruelty, you know, sadism. Again, if they're coming from an abusive background, sometimes people who are abused, they become abusers, but they might not do it in the exact same way. So if somebody is beaten, they may say, oh, that's terrible to beat somebody, but they still are mentally screwing with another person's head. And so these kinds of things where they're keeping you thinking, you know, with the mind games, it could be like in relationships, especially, this can come out, where they're kind of promising that they're going to be with you. Maybe they're involved with many relationships. So a bigamist, I could see like somebody, a Gemini individual, having a double life. And, you know, sometimes when these people get busted out, people say, why would you do that? If the person has the moon in Aquarius, or any air sign, Libra, especially for the romantic relationships, these people may be super detached because they're going to have the sun and the moon and maybe even some inner planets in Gemini, and be very cut off from their emotions. Again, coming from abuse and then having that can be dangerous because they could be very sadistic and it doesn't affect them. They don't feel anything. And so one of the red flags with a person like this is catching them in lies. And yes, I mean, there's huge lies like, no, I'm not married. And you find out they are married with 5 children. But what about the little lies where, you know, you've heard maybe, I think in AA, they talk about lying when the truth would serve them better or something. These are like dysfunctional, maladaptive tendencies from people who come from dysfunctional families to lie. Again, it's a self-protective measure, and people are doing that for a reason. But other people who, you know, come across this, they're like, whoa, this person just lied and said something that it made absolutely no difference. Like they lied about what they ate that morning, and there was nothing on the line for them to do that, but they just wanted to. That to me is trying to have control. You know, if their moon is in a Scorpio, they may want to have a secret side to themselves, so they have that power. So even with bigamy, they have a secret life. They have something that nobody, that their partner doesn't know about with them. And also they get that glory of more than one relationship that is intense, but they don't really have to have an intense relationship because they're bouncing back and forth between different people. So it can get I think it can get really weird with Gemini narcs. And if you've had anything like this, please comment below, because I'm curious about my observations here. These are not personal experiences, so I'm kind of speculating, obviously. And this gets to gaslighting, which is I'm sure there are many forms of gaslighting, but I'm sure that Gemini is a master at all of them, because to me, gaslighting is denying the truth to get you to question your sanity, or projecting what they're doing onto you to kind of like get it off of them. And people do this to kind of cover their tracks. I was going to say politicians are doing this, but this is happening in different areas of life. So this kind of confuses other people. I never said that. What are you talking about? Or falsely accusing somebody of doing something. I'm not talking about suspicion, where somebody says, "Did you do this?" and they really believe it. But I'm talking about when they really are trying to convince you that you did something you didn't do. That's getting inside your head. Of course, that's a mind game. Again, if they can question your sanity, they've weakened you, and you might start to kind of question yourself, especially if you're somebody like a Pisces, a Libra person who tends to be very influenced by your partner to begin with. You may be like, this can happen with a parent to a child. This is the danger, because a position of authority like that. And when you get to be an adult and you're dealing with these people, as you get older, you will start to see this more and more, what they're doing, and you'll be onto their game. But by then, you may have already suffered quite a bit. So it's that's the problem with it, is that once you figure them out, decades may have gone by. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention as red flags is cutting comments that are made to, kind of trigger insecurity within you. And some of these things, these people are very bright. And that's the scary thing about it is that they may be very well aware of what your insecurities are, because you may have even mentioned them. So let's say it's a woman who mentions her thighs, or mentions cellulite, or mentions wrinkles, and then that person kind of slips it in. Oh yeah, I'm a woman complains about her cellulite, and then 2 days later, maybe not right away, yeah, I saw your cellulite, yeah, and almost kind of like in an offhand way. That can be very subtly damaging, because the person, it's like that's their Achilles heel. And so that's another form of mind games, because they're taking something, in some cases they just know are your weaknesses, and they're using them against you. So needless to say, that can be very psychologically dangerous, because you may be somebody who is who has low self-esteem involved with this person, and they can, take it even lower. And so it wasn't great to begin with. But even a person who has a decent self-esteem, if they're with somebody who is just constantly at them over and over again, that can beat them down, We talk about beat downs as we think of physical, but of course it can be mental. So what can you do about that? Well, if you're dealing with a parent, if you have a parent who is like really openly name calling, put downs, mind games, gaslighting, and you let them know that you know what they're doing and they continue to do it, then you have to be the one to decide, whether or not you can continue in this relationship. And people say, oh, that's just words, but that can be, if you have to understand something. If it's a parent, you've grown up with this. So this isn't just something new that has come out of nowhere. And so it is re-triggering, re-traumatizing to have this. This is something that I realized because, there are some people who are able to deal with difficult people, like, let's say on a professional level, a teacher that works in a high-risk community where a lot of children are coming in every day and they're traumatized and they're very mean to the teacher, and she's even able to get them to open up and be, but she has to go through a lot of abuse from those kids. That teacher may come from a loving family and she didn't get those horrible messages. You may have somebody else who wants to do that type of work as well, and they just can't do it because it's too triggering for them. I've even used trigger as a joke, and maybe I shouldn't have because it's overused, but there are cases where people do get triggered and it's coming from, and they have to watch it, because it is coming from the past. And it does bring up a lot of unhealed wounds, And sometimes it can be good because then you know what you have to work with. But it can be kind of dangerous in the temporary situation because if it's overwhelming, that can just be hard to handle. If it's a partner, I would say the same thing, that you have to really, be careful of dealing with somebody who is a pathological liar that you can't trust. I mean, what kind of relationship can you have? And, as I said, this can be on a spectrum. There may be instances where you're able to perhaps cope with it and get therapy and deal with it. But if it's something that it's a chronic problem and the other person doesn't want to acknowledge it, then that seems like it would be very difficult to remain in such a situation. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link to my site is below. Thanks for listening. Bye.